Thank you. Big weekend, so thanks for sticking around. Amazing. And thanks for WordCamp having me. Keen to be here and keen to share my knowledge. I did want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today, which is the Yagara and Turrbal people. We pay respect to elders past, present and emerging and recognise them as our first engineers, technologists and problem solvers that this land ever saw. When I was 6, I wanted to be a swimmer, and I would go to swim club every Friday night and eat a sausage on bread and swim 25 metres at a pretty average pace for a 6-year-old. But knowing that I was in the sharks group rather than the stingrays, which was for the average swimmers, or the starfish, which was for the below average swimmers, was all the motivation I needed to know that I wanted to be a swimmer. When I was 8, I wanted to be a tennis player, and my dad would tie a piece of rope across 2 wheelie bins in our cul-de-sac and would hit the ball back and forth every afternoon. When cars would come, we'd race and pull those wheelie bins back off the road, and I even had my sponsors picked out. It was going to be Bonds and Canterbury. They were going to sponsor me when I won the Australian Open. Exciting. When I was 9, I wanted to be a musical theatre performer, and I joined a local after-school theatre program and had one line in the end-of-year production. But I wasn't a triple threat, and I was pretty much barely a single threat. So it was like of no surprise when it didn't really work out, and I didn't return for a second year of the program. When I was 11, we had a day at school which was come as yourself in the year like 2026 day, and you'd come dressed as what you wanted to be in 20 years' time. And for some unknown reason, I decided I would go as a child psychologist. And like, to be clear, I had no interaction with a child psychologist to date in my 11 years of life at that time. But I had created a business card for myself, perhaps to recruit other 11-year-olds as patients. And I had designed a logo, and it was like red roses as a background, and then it said CS on it, because I thought psychologists started with an S. So that was as far as that went. When I was 12, I wanted, after that seminal trip that everyone has down to Canberra, I wanted to be the first female blonde Australian Prime Minister. I didn't really think too hard about what that would actually mean, but 4 years later, when we did have our first female Prime Minister, I was like quite cranky that she'd stolen my career path, although like there was still hope that I could be the first blonde Prime Minister. Still a possibility. When I was 16, I wanted to be a dentist. After telling my uncle this, he like thrust my head into my sister's mouth and said, "See this? This is what you will look at all day." But like he works in risk. Like he's like quite high up in one of the banks in risk, and that sounds pretty boring too. So anyway, each to their own. When I was 17, I wanted to be a doctor, and I had positioned my life around this new goal. And during subject selection, I took chemistry, biology, maths B, maths C, English, and study religion, a classic for all doctors. And I even sat the UMAT exam and completely scaled back all the joyful parts of my life to focus on these studies. And as part of the support process, you'd go and speak to one of the senior leaders at school, and I happened to get the principal. And I sat down, and she was going to give me my OP prediction. And she said asked me what I was considering after school, and I said I wanted to be a doctor. And then she looked at my OP prediction and she said to me, "Oh, have you considered nursing? It's genuinely something that happened to me. It's crazy." But I did go on to exceed that OP prediction, which is pretty good, but not enough to get into medicine. But I did start a biomedical science degree, and I got sort of like 6 months into that program. And I failed a biology subject, and I just realised I didn't want to be a doctor. I'd just been watching too much Grey's Anatomy. So that was sort of the end of that one. And then when I was 18, I wanted to be a software developer, and I changed my major to computer science. But the vision fell apart pretty quickly because I'd have these assignments, and they were in Python. It was like pretty simple stuff. And I would like get assignments from friends, and then I would put errors into them to make them look like they were more feasibly my code. And that was just I'm fine though. But that was like the first year, so you can't do that for 3 more years. And then when I was 19, I wanted to be a music producer, and I changed university courses to study creative industries, but pretty quickly realised that they had this compulsory unit where they literally said, like, you're not going to find a full-time job, so let's like talk about what a portfolio career is and how that might work. So that was, yeah, a bit of a red flag as a career. So I added in a business degree to like increase the chances that I'd be employed in 5 years' time. And then when I did end up finishing that degree, I was 21 and all I wanted to do was get into a grad program. And I had this big long list of grad programs within Australia, like I had written them down in my like KikiK diary. And I went through the interview process and like interviewed for maybe half a dozen programs. And one of them was the Defence Force, and they said, why do you want to work for the Defence Force? And I said, that's what I'm here to find out. Which is like not what you should say, anyway. Not sure if this is surprising to you, but I had 0 offers by the end of that. And like I panicked a little bit, and I just took the first role I could find, which was like a graduate HR consultant role in a tiny consulting business, where I'd be left to my own devices. And I think most businesses do want 21-year-old graduates consulting on their HR needs. So really, really good stuff. When I was 23, I wanted to work for a company that had free breakfast. And this meant that I applied for a role and took a job as an internal recruiter. A role that I was extremely underqualified for and underprepared for, but there was free breakfast. And like every 3rd week it was ham and cheese croissant week. So that was pretty exciting. And then when I was 25, I wanted to be a drama teacher, but I guess like I'd never acted before, and I haven't been in a drama classroom like in over a decade at that point. But it was peak COVID, and I'd been working from home for full time for 6 months, which might have something to do with that thought process. When I was 26, I wanted to not cry at work every day. It's fine though, it's all good, I'm here, it's all good. So I took the first job I could, throwing myself into a small recruitment agency that required me to master both client and candidate management. And as someone who hated networking and like could not sell ice to an Eskimo, what could possibly go wrong? And then I guess I'll introduce myself now, but my name is Emily Conaghan, and it's quite hard to describe what I've developed in terms of my career, but I've managed to find a space that merges 2 things I'm quite passionate about and allegedly good at, which is people and technology. And I'm the Technology Capability Manager at Auto & General. In this role, I manage an internal learning and development program where we take non-technical folk from across the business and sometimes externally as well. We teach them full stack development over the course of a year, and then we transition them back into our development team into roles where they become developers. I also look after a number of capability programs within technology. Exciting stuff. It's a great role and I love it, but it hasn't always been smooth sailing. You may have noticed from my motivations throughout my career, and like each time I sort of like have a new idea, I get in the habit of getting swept up into it and have these like random ideas of where my career is going to head. And it was a pattern that sort of developed through my early childhood and really hit its stride when I graduated high school over a decade ago now, where every sort of 18 months to 2 years, I get this itch, this like unsettled feeling that I need to do something different with my life. And the easiest place for me to make a change outside of like the hairdresser's chair was my career. And like each time that itch arrived, I'd simply sort of leap before looking or like thinking about what I was doing, which meant that I sort of had this long list of career changes that sort of made no sense to who I was as a person. And I knew that something sort of had to change. So when I was 27, I started to career plan. And I think a lot of people just wing it and they just sort of wait for a recruiter to call, or they find an opportunity on Seek that sounds all right, and they just go for it. But for me, it was sort of wanting to find that purpose behind what I was doing. As a bonus, if you stick around to the end, I do have a workbook that I can use as well. Not physically, it's 2025, but like there's like a QR code, so it's all good. Anyway, so My process of career planning is broken up into 3 parts. So step 1 is to work out who you are, which is like pretty easy. And then step 2 is to work out what it is that you want from a career. And the third and final step is to put it all together and start forming a path forward. So my philosophy towards career planning is a little bit like building a house. And in this house building project, your floor plan is working out who you are, and then the interior design is working out what you actually want. And if you don't spend your time working out the floor plan, it's going to look like not great, and it's not going to function well. And you'll sort of end up with like a pool with no ladder and a kitchen with 3 ovens and no windows, or maybe like a basement with a deranged goblin that's painting. But on top of that, if you've got like the bones right, but the interior design is like just grey throw cushions and like hard plastic chairs, the house may be functional, but it's not going to bring you joy. And the same thing stands for your career. It must be both functional, but also bring you joy. So for me, the career planning process involved a large sort of artist pad, like the ones that you might do like an oil pastel sunset, like in Year 8 art. And then I use that and go through the process of critically thinking and answering questions and writing them down and committing these thoughts to paper. For you, it might look like something different, but the essence will still remain. So let's dive into step 1, which is, who am I? We're going to start with an elevator pitch. So imagine you're getting into a lift in a 40-story building and you're heading to the top. And you hop into the lift and one of the passengers is in there and they say to you, tell me about yourself. What would you say? So write out your elevator pitch that tells someone about you both professionally and personally. It takes, in sort of 1 minute, you can get through about 200 words. So keep your elevator pitch to that kind of length. And keep finessing it until you feel like it encapsulates what it is that who you are at your core. So, for example, my name is Emily. My career to date has been focused around the synergy between people and technology. I have a background in HR and have slowly made my way to where I am today via recruitment, learning to code, which is where I am now as a program capability management. I enjoy roles where I can harness my organisational skills with creativity and strategy. I'm happiest at work when I get to collaborate on projects with key stakeholders. I've lost it now. While also being able to work autonomously to execute strategies that may be outside the box. My friends would describe me as funny and organised. In my spare time, I'm an avid reader, a member of 3 book clubs, a comedy nerd, and a podcast enthusiast. So that's about 127 words. So there's a bit of room there to play with. It also might be nice to have a shorter pitch and then like ask the other person in the elevator like what they do, but up to you. So next step is to write a list of every job you've ever had. Give each job a rating out of 10 to represent the level of job satisfaction you have or had in each of these roles. You don't need to write out why, but just have a think about whether there's common ground amongst these scores and reflect on the common elements that you may see. So it could be things like tech stack, team size, management style and structure, ways of working, whether or not you had direct reports, role expectations, the product you're working on, broader impact of the role, level of busyness in the role. And branching off from these questions, you're then going to zoom in and focus on that list, particularly of the jobs you've just had in the last 5 years. So, for each job listed out, list out what you did day to day, whether you had any significant achievements during this time. This shouldn't be exhaustive, but it should rather distill and focus these jobs down to a list of the big rocks. So aim for a list of 10 bullet points with no more than 10 words per bullet point. And remember, this is only for you, so there's no need to get creative with flowery language or provide additional context. It's just the nuts and bolts. And if you're struggling, remember what you achieved in each role could be a good prompt to start with. And you can sort of build this into sort of a bit of a career documentation. Maybe that could be a resume, who knows? Cool. So once you've got this detailed list organised, we're going to take a deep dive into your skill set. So I've got a big long list of skills. So have a look at these hard skills and take note of the distribution of your skill set and where and which areas you're frequenting the most. This is another one that you might need to ruminate on and come back to after a few days. So look at it, leave it, come back. I'd recommend giving at least 48 hours before your first look and then coming back again, seeing if there's anything else you can add. Noting that this list definitely is not exhaustive, but you can go wild, add as many skills as you want to become a genuine reflection of your skill set. So we've had a look at hard skills. Obviously we're going to look at soft skills as well. Circle the ones that you identify with, add more, you get the pattern. And again, take note of the distribution and take notes of which ones sort of elicit a response from you, an emotional response. So do you highlight problem solving and analytical thinking with ease, or does people management give you war flashbacks when you circle it? Maybe. Next step is to populate these 4 boxes. So what am I good at? What am I bad at? What do I enjoy? And what do I hate? So you want to refer back to your list of skills for inspiration, and don't be limited by just work-related skill sets. You can bring things in from your personal life, if you love walking your dog while bouncing on a pogo stick, that's really telling information as well. You can also have conflicts in this section. So for me, really good at talking to people, but also hate talking to people. Bit of a conflict there. Quite challenging day to day at work when managing people. And the final step of the process is to, we go into our most personal step yet, and it's to pick your top 5 values. So this is a pretty standard list of values. If you Google values, this is what will come up. But you might have to do a long list and make it into a short list. But the important thing is that you narrow it down to 5. And it will tell you a lot about yourself and what's important to you. But make sure you reflect on it. Write out these 5 values and think about what those 5 values say about you. And again, this is another part where you might have to do a bit of a first shot, come back to it in a couple of days once you had to think about it. Cool. And then we're going to go back to step 1 and rewind and have a look at your pitch again. Critically think about this statement in light of all the information that you have collated across the rest of step 1. Does it need to be refreshed or updated to better reflect who you are? Maybe, maybe not. And that's part 1 done and dusted. And you might notice that this part largely relies on self-reflection. And the practice of self-reflection isn't new, but I do think when you're working a million miles an hour, it's often the thing that gets left behind, and you sort of want to ask yourself the question, when was the last time something really big in my career happened? And whether it's good or bad, the big things deserve reflection, and to work out what happened and why they happened, and what the learning is from that experience. Just thinking about your work life would be if you reflected on, just think about how good your work life would be if you took the opportunity to reflect on it more often, and how much better off you'd be if you had sort of further developed your own sense of self within your career. So that's sort of self-reflection, why it's important. So we're going to put that aside for the moment, and then we're actually going to take a little bit of a side step before we get to step 2 and look at technology. I think in some ways career planning and technology can make it really easy. There's new opportunities opening up every day, as you would expect. It's a field that continues to grow and will continue to grow for the foreseeable future. On the other side, this growth and constant state of flux can change, and change can mean that even if you do create this beautiful plan and work that you work on sort of executing it, the job you are working towards may not exist in 5 to 10 years' time. Just the way it is. So, with that in mind, here's some questions to look at as you go into thinking about your career from a technology perspective or being close to technology. So what's your current tech stack? What are your current technical tools? What tech stack do you enjoy working on? What are the gaps in your knowledge if you need to become employable or look for a new job? What does the industry landscape look like in the future in relation to my skill set? And what do I need to add to my skill set in order to make sure it's future-proofed? So there's some things to start thinking about from a technology perspective. All right. Step 2, like in the most non-threatening way possible, the next step is to ask yourself the question, what do you want? And understand the things that are important to you in your career. And it's pretty crucial in realising what this next opportunity might look like for you. I know when a lot of people start looking for their next job, they might have an idea of what they're looking for, but in my experience, rarely do they actually dedicate the time to uncovering all the things that they're actually looking for in their next career move. The important thing is that you think deeply and search for the answer and write it down. And I think that's key, is to be able to see everything out in front of you, which is why I say write it down. So think about finding a new job and the things that are important to you and the things that aren't important to you. This is step 1. So there are no rules, and this can be as broad or as general as you like. It might be important to you to work in the CBD, or it might be important to you to work somewhere where there is a diversity and inclusion policy. It might be important to have an endless supply of cornettos in the freezer. I've been to an office in Brisbane that has that. I'm not sure if they do anymore because they made some redundancies. So you think you'd get rid of the cornettos before the people, but maybe not. Anyway. On the other hand, what are the non-important things to you? It might be not important to be able to work from home. You might not care for social drinks on a Friday afternoon. And again, come back to this a couple of times. There are things that may immediately come to mind, but there's also maybe that secondary level that you don't think of the first time. So walk away and come back to it. So the next question is to ask about industries. So think about all the industries they are and sort them into 3 groups. So yes, no, or maybe. Consider your personal interests and ethics with this one. How do you feel about gambling or mining? Does e-commerce light you up? I'd hope so. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how badly does like fintech make you want to claw your eyes out? Think about that. Make sure you consider each industry on the list, even if the bulk of them land in the maybe pile. This is still useful information and data to have. And then we go into the next one, which is the big one. Brainstorm company attributes and manager attributes of your ideal role. When I was in recruitment, the average tenure of a developer, which is where I was recruiting at the time, was sitting at under a year. And while I expect that number to probably go up a bit since that data, as it sort of has corrected over the past couple of years, it still means that people these days have probably had at least a couple of jobs they're able to sort of consider when looking for their next job. And that means that there's probably a good chance that you've had exposure to different types of jobs and working with different managers to be able to get a feel of what works for you. The exploration of company and manager attributes should be a bit of a brain dump. Get messy with it. Consider all things like org size, executive structure, delivery methodology, company values, workplace environments, benefits and policies. On the management front, you might want to consider leadership style, number of direct reports, background and experience, communication style, appetite for collaboration, delegation methods, and problem-solving style. While these 2 boxes are super helpful to help you identify where's next in your career, it's also helpful information to take with you into an interview. This can be absolutely formulate the basis of all your interview questions in that process. So now comes the fun part. You're going to make a list of dream companies you'd like to work for and categorise them into big dreams and small dreams. Your small dreams are the companies that you could achievably work for tomorrow, like inverted commas. They might be, companies that are in Brisbane, they're hiring, they've got that sort of thing going on. The big dream companies are the ones that are a little bit more out of reach. So there might be good targets to work towards, but maybe they have most of their people overseas, or they don't really recruit in whatever it is that you're working on very often. So these are the sort of bigger dreams that you might need to work towards. The final step is to understand what you actually want. Understanding what you actually want is a big questionnaire, and asking yourself the obvious questions that you might consider to be a deal breaker. So these are: what job titles would you consider? What job titles would you not consider? Would you relocate for a role? If you would relocate, where to? Would you do any additional study for a new role? Would you do any retraining for a new role? If you were to do any retraining, what would this look like? What's your monetary hygiene factor? So the minimum that you need to be able to survive from a financial standpoint. And what's your ideal salary? So if you had your way, what would they ideally be paying you? What would flexibility look like for you in this ideal role? And would you like to travel as part of your role? So these are all the questions that you need to consider. So that's the bulk of the process done. Now we look at step 3, and we're going to put everything together, taking that information you've generated from step 1 and 2. You're going to distill it down to 2 pages. So 1 page for part 1 and 1 page for part 2. This means that you should be able to visibly see everything, all of your thoughts in your line of sight. Now, reflecting on your answers, you're going to create a vision statement. So write yourself a vision statement. This doesn't need to be within the realm of possibility, and it can be extremely far-fetched. But essentially, the vision statement should summarise what it is that you actually want if you were really truly honest with yourself. It might look a little bit something like this. I want to be a front-end developer at a large fintech company. I want to use React and I want to manage people. I want there to be a focus on learning and development, and I want to work with a manager who demonstrates servant leadership and understands the importance of diversity in a team, and I want there to be free breakfast. So now your starting point may impact your next steps. So if your vision statement is within the realm of possibility, this might be an indication that you need to go back to the drawing board because you're dreaming too small. But if it sort of seems like it's at the right spot for you and where you sort of want to head in the long term, you're on the right track. If you get into a situation where you've got your vision statement and that role is definitely not that next role in your pipeline, you've got to think about, how do we plan out what's next? So there's a little bit of planning to be done, and depending on how your brain works, this might be easy or a little bit more challenging. So essentially you need to ask yourself the question, what do I need to get from where I am to where I want to be? And there's many different parts this could take, and it could look like upskilling or retraining, a job transition, but that's like the step in between, a job aligned with your current skill set at a larger company that will enable that sort of internal mobility, a career break to give you sort of the space to think about where it is that you want to go and what you want to do. Know that working out the steps can be the hardest part. You might need to talk to people who can help you with this process, so whether that is family, friends, recruiters, training providers, your leaders, colleagues, anyone who knows you or knows about where you want to head will be helpful in this. So then comes the next part, which is around executing. So once you've got the plan, that's where we go from here. And this can be a bit of a balance because the firmer you hold onto that list of requirements that you've come up with and your non-negotiables and your vision, the more likely it is that you're able to move towards your vision statement more quickly. And I see this part of the process a little bit like online dating, where you start and you're really picky and you've got your list of non-negotiables and you're no one under 5'11", no one holding a fish, no Jordan Peterson stands. But then it takes a bit longer than you think it's going to, and you get really frustrated, and then you start to relax those, and then someone who's 5'10" sneaks through, And, and then you think like, oh, maybe he's just holding the fish, ironically. And maybe like it's fine if he stands Jordan Peterson, at least he'll have really good posture. And then, and then like one thing leads to another, and then you're on a date with a fish. And it's not, you're in a different realm to where you started. And the same thing goes for your career. Approaching it with strategy and holding firm to that strategy will result in a more aligned outcome for you in the end. And that's it. That's the process. It worked for me. I did it, and I sort of have a better understanding of where I'm going and what I want to do and where my strengths are now. And I hope it can work for you as well. As promised, you can connect with me. You can also use that workbook if you like. It's like these slides, but in workbook form. Exciting. Yeah, I would recommend printing it out as well. Print it out, scribble all over it, and I think that will make a big difference as well. And if you just like don't feel like doing another QR code today, you can send me a LinkedIn message to say like workbook please, and I'll send it through. But that's me. Any questions? Thank you. Hello. I don't think it pays the bills, unfortunately. Bit of manifestation. Love it. No worries. Hello. Yeah. Yeah, I think if I was going, like, for example, if I like decided I loved agency recruitment and set up my own agency, I'd probably do something similar like this in terms of like what clients align with what I want, and like having a really hard resolve of like the ones that don't reply to emails or don't do this and that. They're the ones I don't want to work for, and being quite firm on that. So I think that's the same idea. Yeah, absolutely. Which I think that's that self-reflection piece of like what work actually does light you up, and then changing your like offering of what you actually offer to reflect that as well. No worries. Hello. Yeah. I think so. That's interesting because I think there was a time, maybe 5 years ago, where niching was really popular, and you'd get like within marketers, people would look for SEO specialists and find them like in a really niche way, or be like technical SEO, whatever it is, and then you sort of I think it's also economy driven as well. So when the economy is really bad, people don't want specialists; they want generalists that can do a bit of everything for cheap. And now I think we're probably back in the stage where people might want more generalists now. I'm not like too familiar with the market anymore. But yeah, I think you can definitely apply that to niching. And if you look at the idea of like what are the things that do light you up and you want to work on, that might be your niche. But it also has to like fit the monetary hygiene factor. Like if you love copywriting or you love that sort of side of things, but there's never any jobs out there, or that it doesn't pay the bills, that's probably the balance you've got to weigh out of what's important to you. And it might be the money piece, or it might be the the love of the job and the craft that you're doing. So I think that's the balance you can get from it.